Good morning. It's Mark Platt, Enterprise Editor of the San Diego Union-Tribune, here with star columnist, can I call you that?
Sure.
Michael Smolens. And Michael has been the honcho on all our political coverage. And I guess there's a big political event tomorrow?
There is. It's sneaking up on us.
What is that political
event?
We
have the primary.
Okay,
the
great.
jungle primary.
The jungle primary. Let's start with the jungle primary. A lot of, I don't know if it's controversy, but a lot of talk and discussion and debate over. Why don't you explain to the uninitiated
what
it is?
The real term is they call it the top two primary.
Right.
And unlike in the past where you had separate party primaries for the Democrat and Republican Party primaries, Green Party and so forth, everybody's thrown into the mix now. And so just the top two vote getters advance regardless of party affiliation. So it could be two Democrats, two Republicans in certain races. Again, these are the partisan races for Congress, state legislature, and so forth, not the local races. But nobody wins outright in the congressional and legislative races. They still have to go to November. So somebody could get 99%, but unlike, for instance, the County Board of Supervisors, where you win if you get a simple majority in June. Everybody in the congressional races go to November.
What is give us a brief history of why they went to that system?
Well, that's a good question. People think that this encourages more participation, particularly in primaries, because the turnout is always low in the primaries, sometimes just embarrassingly low. And also there's this notion, and it's still pretty new, I think we're only in the second or third election cycle, so we haven't really seen what its impact has been in theory.
Right.
What it was supposed to do is it was supposed to allow more moves to moderates to get elected, because you'd go across the spectrum. So if indeed you had, in a very Republican or very Democratic district, you might have the case where, as opposed to a weak Democrat in a Republican district, you might have a more moderate Republican and a more conservative Republican to give people better choice. And the flip side works for the Democrats as well. But there really haven't been that many races. Usually it still kind of plays out that the strongest Republican and the strongest Democrat advance to November.
Okay, and a good example of this, let's look at the governor's race. Okay, so you have Gavin Newsom, who's kind of well ahead. Mm-hmm. And then John Cox has been surprising for second place, and Bill Rigosa trailing in some polls in a distant third. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because a lot of people early on in the election season were really thinking, gee, we could have, for the first time, no Republican on the November ballot for governor. That doesn't appear to be the case. I always like to put the caveat, the polls are one thing, but let's see what happens tomorrow. But the polls have been pretty consistent. All different polls have shown the order that you have. So it does look like it would be John Cox in second place, a Republican from Rancho Santa Fe, a local guy, businessman, and Gavin Newsom. So that dynamic didn't quite play out. It does look like it's playing out in the U.S. Senate race, where you've got Dianne Feinstein and State Senator Kevin De Leon, who's trailing her a lot, but he seems to be enough ahead of anybody else because the Republicans just didn't even try to field a major league candidate. They just knew they were so outclassed. So that would be the second U.S. Senate race in California that had two Democrats and no Republicans in November.
And Gavin Newsom is down here again today, and Travis Allen's here. Why are so many people coming down to San Diego?
Well, it's the second largest city, in the state, and it's finally sort of getting its due. It's funny because even as it was, had been that size, people sort of always view the LA area and the San Francisco area and even the Sacramento in the northern part of the inland valleys. But its political demographics have changed. Some people still think it's a conservative Navy town. Well, it's still a Navy town, but the city proper of San Diego, the Democratic voter registration, is like a couple touchdowns more at least over the Republican registration, and even countywide, Democrats have the edge. Of course, like everywhere in California, the decline to state or the people that have no political party preference have gained. In fact, sort of one of the interesting things, while Republicans are thrilled to have what they think is going to be a gubernatorial candidate on the ballot when they were really worried about being shut out, the Republican Party continues to sink. In voter registration, they are now third, if you will, behind Democrats, which they've been behind for a long time, but also the decline to state. The people, the so-called independents, have inched past Republicans. So that's a pretty embarrassing moment, and they still haven't figured out how to get out of that situation.
Okay. So now let's talk about your column over the weekend, which was very well received.
About the Blue Wave.
Blue Wave. What were you getting at there?
Well, you know, I mean, when we came into this year, everybody, well, not everybody, a lot of people were predicting a real big surge of, you know, Democratic interest, which there is, and the potential for the Democrats to take over the House of Representatives. They need to flip 23 seats nationwide. People weren't even talking about that before the 2016 election. That was just totally off the table. But because of the Trump effect, really, and we've seen this locally, certainly up in the Darrell Issa district, the 49th district in our North County and Southern Orange County. But, you know, as things change and time moves on, things seem to temper a little bit. The Republicans gain their footing somewhat, and it won't be as easy for Democrats. I still think that there's going to be that surge. We won't really know until November. That's where the seats are really won, but we'll get an indication in some of the key contested districts, and we'll go back to the 49th for explanation. There's the potential there of 2 Republicans advancing to November, again in the top 2 primary. I still think it's going to be a Republican and a Democrat, but I think that if in that race and some of the other ones in Southern California that are being targeted, where the same dynamic is kind of in play, where you could get 2 Republicans in November, if Democrats get shut out of a handful or a small handful of those districts, that does not bode well for the big blue wave surge in November. But because they're counting on California to pick up you know, a handful of seats to help this whole nationwide push.
Okay, so now let's look at some of the local offices. What intrigues you the most, and what are you really going to be interested in?
The big one, and we've written a lot about, I've written a lot about, is the supervisorial race in the 4th supervisor district. Ron Roberts, incumbent for over 2 decades, is termed out, and so it's an open seat, and that's you know, central San Diego, pretty much the city, and it's hotly contested. There's a lot of weird dynamics going on. Lori Saldana, it was sort of a insurgent candidate. We like to use these interesting terms, but it started off as a campaign with former DA Bonnie Dumanis and Nathan Fletcher, who had been an assemblyman and run for mayor twice, and Bonnie Dumanis had run for mayor. And then Lori Saldana got in, so you've got Fletcher, a Democrat who'd been a Republican, and Lori Saldana who'd been you know, pretty much a progressive liberal Democrat for her career. They're starting to really fight it out, and you know, there's a lot of interesting cross currents and alliances where you've got some labor groups. The bulk of labor is behind Nathan Fletcher this time, but Saldana's got some strong support and some money behind her. So what certainly the Dumanis people would like, they view Fletcher as the real threat in November. They'd like to knock him out in the primary and take their chances with Lori Saldana. But having said that, it looks like Bonnie Dumanis will get in. The way she's campaigning, she doesn't seem to be working as hard as the other candidates. Maybe she doesn't have to because they're all fighting it out. But you also have a local attorney, Omar Passons, who's well, he was endorsed by our editorial board, and he's gotten a lot of cred, I think, from Democrats, but people don't know that he's just had enough resources to make a big splash in this campaign.
Does party affiliation really matter in local
Well,
races?
technically it's a nonpartisan race, but yeah, it matters a lot because Bonnie Dumanis has the Republicans behind her. Nathan Fletcher has the Democratic Party, and as I said, some of the key unions, the Labor Council. So yeah, they really get out and work this. But you know, like I say, technically it's nonpartisan, and we'll have to see that if it holds what we were thinking, that Bonnie Dumanis gets into the runoff. She's a Republican, but she's a pretty moderate Republican certainly, and I think certainly as DA she's gotten crossover votes. We'll see. She did not do well when she ran for mayor in 2012. Nathan Fletcher didn't make it to the runoff either. But that's sort of the dynamics, and there's a lot of bitterness on the Democratic side over this.
Okay, and then real quickly, let's talk about the DA's race and the sheriff's race. What are you looking for there?
Well, you know, the DA's race has been the higher profile, and you've got Summer Stephan running against, she's the incumbent, appointed incumbent, running against Genevieve Jones-Wright, a public defender, deputy public defender. And that's been an intriguing race because George Soros, the billionaire who is big on criminal justice reform, has financed a lot of candidates or campaigns behind candidates across the country and been very successful. And his PAC has put a lot of money behind Jones-Wright. Stephan's campaign, they were sounding the alarm of this, you know, the evil outside money. You can view that however you like, but they've done a very good job of raising money and getting the various law enforcement groups to spend heavily behind her. Again, always cautious about polls, but we've had a couple polls and it shows that she's even pulling away, which sort of surprised me. I thought it would be tightening up.
Right.
And the key thing that the Soros PAC pulled their television advertising from Jones Wright. So that looks like they're kind of suggesting maybe they can spend their money better elsewhere. They've got some other DA races. And then you mentioned the sheriff. You've got Sheriff Bill Gore, who's been reelected once. I don't think he had any opposition, and then he was. So this is his, I guess it'd be his third term, and he's running against
Myers.
Thank you, Dave Myers. I have a lot of names. Commander within his department, so that's a little awkward. And Myers has been there over 30 years, and it's been kind of bitter. Myers says that ever since he's run, he has been treated unfairly and put in different offices and things like that. Again, it seems the establishment power that Gore has. He'll probably get reelected, but again, you never know. The polls say he's ahead, but those are just polls. He's run into some controversies, misbehavior. That's probably putting it too mildly by a sheriff. Yeah, it's actually atrocious behavior. Right. What he's been accused of basically molesting, harassing, and somehow making sexual advances against women, while he's on the job. And then some other issues, there's been people committing suicide in jails at a higher rate than elsewhere. Right. But like I said, that I don't know how much traction that's gotten in terms of bringing him down. But so those are really like the key races.
So for a lot of people, and then we talk about turnout. Do you expect, because we talked about what happens with the primary system now, maybe it'll build some excitement? What do you expect?
I think so. I don't have a number. It certainly will be lower than November, and Republicans tend to come out more strongly in the primary. I think you will see a better turnout than we did in the last non-presidential election year, because there's a lot of interest certainly on the Democratic side. So you would think that you'd see better turnout among Democrats than you usually get in a non-presidential year.
And where will Trump be a factor in any of these races?
Well, he's a huge factor. Going back to the 49th district, we did a poll, and in addition to talking about where all the candidates are lining up in terms of the horse race, among the issues that are driving voter interest, it was the Trump presidency was the biggest one up there in the 49th. It's also a big issue in the East County 50th district, where we have Duncan Hunter, who's under a lot of pressure because he's under federal investigation, but it looks like he will certainly get out of the primary.
Right.
We'll see what happens in November.
So you're a political junkie, so it's an exciting day for you on primary
It
day.
is. You almost have to remind yourself that and it was kind of fun to go back to the whole blue wave thing, because we've been writing about all this stuff, but you sort of have to bring it kind of home for everybody, because now they're really paying attention. So yeah, but as we've learned that it's not tomorrow, it's Wednesday and Thursday are the tough days.
That's right, that's right. Well, thank you.
You're tired and picking up the pieces.
Great, thanks. Great summary. Thank you, Michael Smolens. I'm Mark Platt. You have a good day and get out and vote.